Bro, Henry Cejudo absolutely has to win this Saturday against Payton Talbot. I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying this. If he doesn't pull it off, it really does damage to his legacy even more. And yeah, he's on a 3-fight losing streak at bantamweight, but it's not like he's been getting humbled by like scrubs, you know? I mean, yes, he lost to Aljo and Merab, two of the absolute best guys in the division. Even that Song Yadong fight, people forget Henry actually had some good moments in there before the eye injury stopped everything. We never got to see how the later rounds would have played out. And it wasn't some one-sided fight like people tried to make it seem. But the main point is this. He has to beat Payton Talbot. Payton isn't undefeated, okay? But he's still that young, dangerous guy. And he has some momentum right now. And if Henry Cejudo loses to someone who isn't at the level of Aljo, Merab, or even Song Yadong, people are going to talk, bro. The whole narrative becomes that Triple C came back and just wasn't that guy anymore. That he should have just stayed retired. That's the game passing him by. And honestly, Henry did it to himself by announcing this fight is his last fight. I wish he kept that part quiet because now the pressure is even heavier. Everyone's talking about it. Even headlines mention retirement. And it creates this weight on this fight that already meant everything for him. So this Saturday is generally do or die for Cejudo. And on the flip side, it's a massive opportunity for Payton Talbot. If he pulls this off, that's a career-changing win. Beating Henry still means something. Not many people have a win over Cejudo. And the ones who do are basically the elite of the division. Adding your name to that list instantly boosts your stock. Going from unranked to being a former double champion. And landing on number 9 in the rankings, that's a huge jump. And the UFC knows exactly what they're doing here. They're putting all their chips on Payton because they see something in him. And I get it. He's kind of zesty. You know, he's kind of weird, but the dude is entertaining as hell when it comes to his style. His style sells fights. He adapts. He's aggressive. And ever since that loss to Barcelo, he's actually been improving. You can tell that he took that fight seriously and made changes afterwards. The UFC loves guys who bounce back like that. Guys who take an L and learn from it and come back better. So for Payton, this is the kind of win that launches you into a whole new tier. And for Henry, this is the kind of fight that decides how people remember the final chapter of his career. Both of them have a lot on the line, all right? Let's just say how it is, just in completely different ways. Now, as for who I'm actually picking in this fight, man, I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be competitive. I don't see either guy getting finished. This feels like one of those fights that is going to go to the scorecards, you know, for a unanimous decision type of, you know, deal where every round is tight, but the momentum slowly leans one way. And if I had to put all my chips somewhere, I think I'm going to put them on Payton. Look, I know that might sound surprising to some people, but I really do believe the improvements he showed. If this was Triple C from 2 fights ago, we might have a different conversation. That version of Henry, that guy probably edges it, let's just be completely honest. But that's not the version we're getting. This is an older Henry, a slower Henry, a guy who's been doing this pound for pound podcast more than he's been fighting, a guy who's been in and out of retirement talk, a guy who's clearly not in the same physical window he once was. Meanwhile, Payton is young, he's hungry, he's adapting every fight, and he's trying to make a statement. I think Payton's going to show the dog in him on Saturday. I think he steps up in a real way and proves that he can hang with the elites. Now, I already know what some of y'all are going to say. Bro, Henry's going to bring his wrestling shoes. Yes, he is. He's going to wrestle Payton into the mat. And that's where it can get really interesting because, yeah, Henry can definitely take Payton down. I do believe that. I'm not denying that. If Henry really commits to it, if he times it right, if he shoots clean once, he can get Payton off his feet. Payton's still young in the game. He's still developing that defensive awareness, so the takedown itself is not a question. The real question is, what happens after the takedown? Let me say that again. What happens after the takedown? Because when was the last time you've ever seen Henry Cejudo truly control somebody on the ground? I'm talking about sustained top pressure, position dominance, ground and pound, threatening submissions, all of that. It doesn't really happen. Yeah, he took Aljo down. Yeah, he took Merab down. But those dudes got right back up because Henry isn't that guy who locks you to the floor like a classic wrestler / grappler. He's explosive with his entries, don't get me wrong, but the control has never been his calling card. People keep acting like he's just going to replicate what Barcelo did. Like he's going to take Payton down, settle into dominant positions, and start threatening submissions or heavy top pressure. But that's not Henry's style at all. Barcelo has that BJJ control, that sticky top game, that consistent possessional advancement. Henry, he's never been that guy to spam takedowns and suffocate someone from top like Habib or Marab. Henry's takedowns are usually more like moments, not phases of the fight. He'll get you down, maybe hold you for a second, and then you're back on your feet. That's exactly what happens in most of his opponents. He gets the takedown, they pose, they stand, and it's right back to the striking. And striking is where this fight can get really tricky for him. You see, when the fight starts, I think the first thing you're going to notice is the difference in speed and range. Payton's going to come out bouncing, switching rhythms, throwing those long, straight, long shots that almost look lazy until they land clean. And Henry's going to have to work a lot harder just to get inside those punching distance. And that's going to force him to rely on his feints early. You'll see Henry trying to draw reactions out of Payton, trying to find that old timing he used to have, while Payton is just touching him up from the outside, testing that distance, seeing how slow Henry's entries really are now. As the round continues, I think Henry's going to start mixing in those leg kicks and the calf kicks because that's one of the few striking tools he still uses better than Payton, in my opinion. He'll try to chip away Payton's legs, trying to slow him down, that youthful movement. But the thing with Payton is that he doesn't need perfect footwork. He's one of those awkward dudes who can just lean, slip, counter off weird angles, even without a strong base. So Henry might have to land some kicks, but Payton is still going to be first in most of the exchanges, in my opinion. He'll beat Henry to the jab, he'll beat him in the resets, and that's where you'll start to see Henry getting a little frustrated. Somewhere in the middle of the fight, Henry's going to have more moments, in my opinion. He always does. He'll blitz forward, one of those, patient triple C combinations, overhand, hook, knee up the middle, and he might actually catch Payton by surprise. Like, let's be real, Payton pulls straight back a lot, sometimes with his chin high up in the air, and Henry's the type of guy who cracks you when you're exiting lazy. That's where Henry's experience shows. He'll read one of Payton's patterns, time it, and then land something that reminds everyone, okay, yeah, this dude's still a problem. But the issue is sustainable. Henry can land moments, Payton can land exchanges. Once Payton adjusts to the speed and the timing, I just think he starts to take over more confidently. He'll start doubling up the jab, forcing Henry to reset over and over, and that consistent range control is going to make Henry hesitate. Payton's hands aren't always the cleanest, but they're fast, long, and creative. He'll throw those snappy check hooks and long straights that keep Henry outside. Henry's going to have a hard time finding consistent ways to close the distance without eating something. You'll see Payton slowly building up rhythm while Henry's output keeps dipping. By the later rounds, I think the youth factor becomes real. I think Payton starts bouncing, still switching, still, reacting quick, while Henry is visibly slower and more flat foot. At that point, the striking becomes almost entirely Payton's fight. He'll be touching Henry at the end of his combinations, peppering him with those long shots, and forcing Henry into defensive entries. Henry's not chinny, but he's older, and taking clean shots from the long, faster striker is not a great place to be, You really start to see the gap between a 37-year-old vet and a young, contender. And when it's all said and done, a striking match between the two looks like Henry's isolated moments of success. But Payton wins the majority of the exchanges. Henry can blitz, he can find good shots here and there, and he's going to make some reads. But Payton is faster, fresher, longer, and simply more active. Over 15 minutes, that style just has more moments, and unless Henry mixes in the wrestling perfectly, the stand-up battle leans heavily towards Payton by the time the final bell rings. But look, man, even with everything I just said, you can't count out Henry. I'm just going to put that out there right now. Yeah, I still made my pick, but the opposite argument is still very real. Henry is still one of those guys where even if he's slowing down, even if the athletic window isn't what it used to be, he's still smart enough and experienced enough to steal a round. And at the end of the day, this is a 3-round fight. Henry doesn't need to dominate all 15 minutes. He just needs to bank 2 rounds. If he can come out sharp and win the first and second, land more meaningful moments, maybe mix in a couple takedowns just to sway the optics, he can absolutely walk away with the decision. And that's why this fight is still closer than people think. Both guys are durable. Both guys are hard to put away. And neither one of them is some fragile fighter who gets clipped and falls apart. So when you really strip away the hype and you strip away the old legend versus the new blood storyline, what you're really looking at is a competitive fight where rounds can still swing off small moments. A clean jab, a well-timed blitz, a late round takedown, a big exchange at the end of the round. It's not some lopsided matchup where one guy has no shot. Henry absolutely has a path to win. That's the thing that makes it so interesting, though, is that both fighters desperately need this win. Payton needs this win to prove that he belongs with the elite, to validate the push that the UFC is giving him, to show that he's not some flashy prospect. And Henry needs to walk away with some dignity, to quiet the wash talk, to end his career on something that's not a losing streak. This is one of those matchups where the pressure is heavy on both sides and only one guy can come out clean. But those are just my thoughts on this fight. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like always, I'll see you on my next one.